The Holy Gospel according to Luke. When some were speaking about the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, Jesus said, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when not one stone will be left upon another. All will be thrown down." They asked him, "Teacher, when will this be? And what will be the sign that this is about to take place?" And he said, "Beware that you are not led astray. For many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and 'the time is near.' Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified, for these things must take place first, but the end will not follow immediately." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, and in various places famines and plagues, and there will be dreadful portents and great signs from heaven. But before all this occurs, they will arrest you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to testify. So make up your minds not to prepare your defense in advance. For I will give you the words and a wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be betrayed, even by parents and siblings, by relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. You will be hated by all because of my name. But not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance, you will gain your souls." The gospel of the Lord. Well, this is Luke's telling of what was happening, what had indeed happened by the time of Luke's writing. Now, we suspect that Luke was writing this somewhere around the year 75, maybe 80. Some put it as late as 85, doesn't matter. What he's talking about is something that had occurred in recent times of his writing. What is he talking about? But he's talking about when the temple of Jerusalem was destroyed in the year 70. Now, it had been destroyed in 586, 87 by Nebuchadnezzar, and then there was a rebuilding of it. This was called the Second Temple. Some refer to this as Herod's temple because he had added all kinds of grounds to it and stuff like that. Anyway, Luke puts into the mouth of Jesus a proclamation of what was going to happen. And that phrase, "not one stone left upon another," was a phrase that was kind of a hallmark to talk about the totality of Rome's destruction. When Rome had destroyed the city of Carthage back in the Three Punic Wars, they said that not one stone was left upon another. They sowed the fields with salt, meaning nothing will grow there again. So that same phrase is now being applied to Jerusalem and certainly to the temple itself. Rome only destroyed two cities, Carthage and Jerusalem. And the centerpiece of Jewish life in the first century was the temple. Didn't matter if you're a Pharisee or if you're a Sadducee, if you're what the center of religious life, the center of cultural life was the temple. And now Rome has cut this out from underneath them. For that reason, Jesus is often referred to as an apocalyptic teacher or even an end times prophet. That's kind of short sighted. I hear many modern scholars refer to him that way, and scholars who are brilliant and who are in many ways to be trusted. But I sometimes think that's a little short sighted. A lot of times it's the gospel writers who are remembering two different things put together. How many times have you thought back and you conflate, that is, combine two different stories? When I'm talking with my dad or with my sister or any of the cousins, and and we talk about things and we're like, wait a minute, that was a different time when that happens. It easily happens to us. And a lot of times, and this is something that has gained a lot of attention in recent years, is what psychologists call the the mindset of trauma. When you look at the destruction of Jerusalem from the first time with Nebuchadnezzar, not all accounts are in agreement with each other, because trauma affects us profoundly. It messes with our memory. We don't always remember things exactly as they happen. Rather, we remember the emotional impact. The very same thing happens to these very human writers of our Bible, both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. So Luke is putting these words into Jesus' mouth. I'm not saying Jesus didn't say it. I'm not saying Jesus didn't predict it, but it becomes a strong thing for Luke because Luke has seen it by the time of his writing. Mark doesn't mention it. Why? Because Mark was written before the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem. Matthew hints at it because Matthew was written somewhere around the same time as Luke, give or take 5 or 10 years. But in Luke's writing and in Luke's gospel here, this passage is used to blend this apocalyptic imagery with a pastoral encouragement. And this shows us, once again, Luke's theological and historical emphases. So the destruction of the temple is foretold in verses 5 and 6. And Jesus predicts, again, not one stone left upon another. Again, reflects Luke's own memory of what had happened. Traumatic, so traumatic for the Jews of the first century and the early Christians, both. And Luke uses this to frame Jesus' authority and his prophetic insight. Verses 7 through 11, these apocalyptic signs, the wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, famines, plagues, and all of this has been echoed throughout Jewish apocalyptic literature. Think of the book of Daniel. Think of Fourth Ezra, which is part of the Deuterocanonical books. These were signs that were not meant to pinpoint a timeline as much as to bring out this sense of universal, even cosmic upheaval. Some would say even divine judgment. Verses 12 through 19 is the persecution of believers, where Luke's audience has already experienced some persecution. They've seen Stephen, the deacon, put to death. Paul has been imprisoned, and by this time, Paul has been put to death during the reign of Nero, and news of that has certainly reached across the Christian world. There have been confrontation with both political and religious authorities. And the passage here, this 12 through 19, they will turn you over to the synagogues and the prisons, meaning religious and political authorities. It reassures them that all of this suffering is part of the divine plan. And it will, like all apocalyptic literature does, tells them you're not in this alone. You will be met with support from above. In this passage, we have a shift from the temple being the centerpiece to testimony, the words that we say. And he says, don't worry. Don't plan out what your defense is going to be. Don't try to be clever. Rather, the Spirit will give you the words to say. And this beautiful, ornate temple becomes a symbol of impermanence. While the disciples witness their testimony, especially under times of stress and persecution, that is what is enduring. That is what is empowered by God. And Luke emphasizes this speech led by the Spirit. I will give you words and wisdom. That's the hallmark of faithful testimony. But we shouldn't read it as being predictive as much as being pastoral. While the passage uses apocalyptic language, to be sure, wars, rumors of wars, famines, plagues, earthquakes, the primary function of all of that is the encouragement from a good shepherd. Luke's not giving us a roadmap of the end times, but Lord knows people have interpreted it that way. Oh, there was the great plague, or rather famine in Ethiopia in what, 1985. Oh, surely this must be the sign. Oh, for crying out loud, we've had wars and rumors of wars throughout human history, at least recorded history. We've had all these things. So none of those things point to it. And even then, Jesus says, but that doesn't mean that the end is coming soon. It's not. It's a theological reinterpretation of suffering and endurance, all in the faithfulness of God. God will remain faithful. And that endurance on our behalf is seen as salvation in verse 19. He says, by your endurance, you will gain your souls. That's Luke's ethic of discipleship. Salvation isn't an escape from suffering, but it's faithfulness through it. And all of this aligns with Luke's broader themes of the reversal of things. The high will be low, the rich will be poor, the satisfied will be hungry, and vice versa. And themes of perseverance and divine judgment and justice. Now, as I said, likely written after the destruction of Jerusalem, Luke is reinterpreting Jesus' words as a kind of a prophetic validation. The temple's fall becomes a theological turning point from sacred architecture to sacred witness. And the use of wars, earthquakes, famines, all of this echoes Jewish apocalyptic literature, like we mentioned before, Daniel, 4th Ezra. But Luke tempers this cosmic terror with a, again, pastoral assurance. Not a hair of your head will perish. You will continue. Kind of like the promise given to Jeremiah's scribe, Baruch. All these things you're going to see, all these things that'll happen, but you will endure. It doesn't even mean that necessarily that our lives will continue, but certainly our witness, our testimony will continue. And Luke's community had certainly experienced real persecution. But suffering shouldn't be interpreted as abandonment by God, but as an opportunity for a testimony led by God's own Spirit. We see in the passage a displacement of power. The temple, which was an elite, frankly, male-dominated space, is now decentered. Luke shifts focus from the vulnerable temple, vulnerable to invasion and attack, to the vulnerable bodies who bear the truth. See, feminist theologians, whom I love and admire, they see this also as a critique of a religion that marginalizes women's voice. To move away from a temple that is male dominated and male centered to a witness, a new temple, the temple of us, where we all have a voice. And even in the middle of violence, you'll be okay. A divine solidarity with those whose bodies have been violated, who've been erased, even politicized, marginalized. And that's another thing that we see in Luke's gospel too, is this witness from the margins. Luke's gospel elevates women as prophetic figures. Think about the Blessed Virgin. The Magnificat is the introduction to this theme of reversal, that the high will be brought low and the low will be elevated and so on. Or you think about Anna at the steps of the temple or in the confines of the temple grounds. And though no one is named specifically here in this passage, this theme of a spirit-empowered speech resonates with women throughout church history who've been silenced. And Jesus is saying, you will endure. And don't worry about getting the words right and setting up your defense. I'll give you words and wisdom. But the passage isn't escapist. Don't think about some kind of a rapture that's going to take you away from trouble. No, this is confrontational. Jesus is preparing his disciples to, well, as they say, catch hell. Not as victims, but as the agents of the truth who refuse to surrender their souls, who refuse to surrender their being, who refuse to surrender their conscience to empire, any kind of empire, not just political empire, religious empire. And the temple has been made into a symbol of religious empire. The destruction of the temple critiques religious complicity with political imperial power. See, liberation theology sees this as a call to dismantle the oppressive structures and to build communities of justice and equity, love. And where there is a quest and a desire, a lust for power, Love takes a back seat. But by your perseverance, you will secure your lives. That's not passive survival, that's active resistance. This is a mandate to remain faithful in the middle of systemic violence. I haven't told this story except to a couple of people. But around about 1999, I was living in Maryland, and there wasn't anything in particular that that I know that was the root of this, but I had a dream. I'm not one to talk about my dreams a whole lot because most of the time my dreams are, you know, I'm back at the Battle of Waterloo and I'm trying to warn Napoleon that those are Germans coming, those aren't French reinforcements. Or I find myself in, or my favorite dream is I have a recurring dream that my favorite band is performing just for me in my living room. Those are my usual kind of dreams. But this one time in 1999, I had a dream where I saw these people, and I was just an observer, not even a ground level observer. It's like I was looking down on this. And I saw these people with their hands tied behind them, and each one of these prisoners was being dragged up this hill path up to the top of this hill, mountain maybe. And the the prisoners, the victims, had these content smiles on their faces, these peaceful smiles. And the one with them would turn them away and would grab the head of an axe, not the with the handle on it, just the axe. And they would kind of, with this really baleful grin on their face, would come up behind them and would hit them in the side of the head, side back of their head with the blade part of the axe head, and try to bring them down with one stroke. And if the victim went down, then they would cheer. And if it didn't kill them outright and they had to hit them again, then both the assailant and the other assailants, the other captors holding the others, would get really angry. And I remember in the dream saying, good God, what am I seeing? Well, I woke up and I knew exactly what I had seen. That those who were, and it's almost like I heard narration of this story, that those who were the captors, they considered themselves to be the true church. They were bringing down those who went against their gospel. But the true believers were those who were following Jesus, is what I mean, those who were acting like Jesus. They were the ones being captured and executed, delightfully executed, delightfully in the sense of those who were doing the executing. I just woke up. I think I woke up in a cold sweat. That those who were doing the persecuting were those who claimed to be doing the work of the Lord. I prayed about that. What what is this? What is this, something that is going to, and I felt the Lord move in my heart that these who thought they were doing the will of the Lord. We're actually persecuting those who did the work of the Lord. A guy named James Cone wrote a book called The God of the Oppressed. And he said in there, the great line, that God always takes the side of the persecuted, even when it's the church with a small c, even when it's the church doing the persecuting. What I mean to say is, if we are on the side of the persecutors, we are not on God's side. I don't care what our motivation is. I don't care what we think. If we're doing the persecuting, even if it's the church doing it, God's not on our side. Take the side of those who are oppressed. Take the side of those who have been marginalized. We must take the side of those that politics, religion, culture wants to move off to one side or do away with altogether. That's how we know we're acting in the name of God. That's how we know that we're doing what Christ would have us do. Stand alongside those who are persecuted. As we watch institutions of power, whether they be political or religious or anything else, as we watch them being dismantled, what has to take its place is a true theology of the body of Christ, that we are all part of Christ's body. When we celebrate communion, the Eucharist, don't we say, in the words of Jesus, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, shed for you and for all people for the forgiveness of sins. We got to get rid of the us and them mentality. It's all us. At least we better start seeing it that way. Thanks be to God.